Welcome to the Explainer. So look, we all want an unblinking eye on the road, right? But seriously, at what cost to our patience? Today we're tearing down exactly what to expect from the Garmin Dash Cam Mini 3. If you've been searching for a way to protect yourself out there without turning your windshield into a cluttered mess, you've probably stumbled across this exact device. But does the reality of actually using it match up to the shiny manufacturer promises? Well, we're going to find out by putting its marketing specs head-to-head with real driver feedback and data pulled straight from its own Amazon listing. Okay, here's our game plan for today's breakdown. First, we'll meet the Garmin Mini 3, then look at the big features packed into this tiny camera. Next, we'll dive into what drivers absolutely love about it, followed by the connectivity roadblocks they hate. After that, we'll check out some dashcam alternatives and wrap it all up with our final verdict. Let's get right into it. Section 1. Meet the Garmin Mini 3. We're kicking things off by looking at what actually makes this specific little dash cam stand out in a seriously crowded market.
Because let's be real, the absolute biggest selling point here is the ridiculously tiny, discrete size. Garmin markets this as an ultra-compact, key-size dash camera that goes virtually unnoticed. And honestly, that is exactly what draws people in. Nobody wants a giant, glowing screen distracting them while they're merging onto the highway. The whole point is to have a device that hides perfectly behind your rearview mirror, quietly doing its job without getting in your way.
And then there's the price tag, exactly $126.40. This firmly puts it in mid-tier gadget territory. It isn't some super cheap bargain bin camera that's going to break in a week, but it's also not a massive $500 setup. It's promising premium stealth along with that reliable Garmin brand name performance for a fairly accessible chunk of change. Moving on to Section 2, Big Features, Tiny Camera. Let's look at the manufacturer's promises and see exactly how Garmin is squeezing high-end tech into such a tiny frame. So, on paper, the specs are exactly what you'd hope for. Garmin boasts crisp 1080p high-definition video, which, trust me, is absolutely crucial when you're trying to read a blurry license plate. You get a wide 140-degree field of view to capture the whole road, plus a built-in Garmin Clarity polarizer lens to cut down on that awful windshield glare. Oh, and you can even save clips completely hands-free using voice commands. Literally, you just tell it to save the video, and boom, done. It is a genuinely impressive amount of tech crammed into something the size of a car key. But hey, there's always fine print, right? Garmin heavily markets this parking guard feature that alerts your phone if your parked car gets bumped. Sounds amazing. But to actually use it, you have to meet 3 very specific conditions. You got to have a paid Garmin Vault subscription, an active Wi-Fi connection wherever the car is parked, and the camera must be hardwired for constant power. So yeah, it's a great feature, but it definitely requires some extra setup and ongoing costs that aren't exactly highlighted on the front of the box.
All right, Section 3, what drivers love, because what's really fascinating here is seeing how these shiny promises hold up for the 938 real people who bought it and left a review. When we look at the numbers, a massive 67% of users gave this little guy a perfect 5 stars, giving it a really solid 4.2-star average overall. So clearly most buyers are pretty thrilled. But wait a second, look at that 11% sitting way down there at 1 star. That is a noticeable chunk of highly frustrated customers, which tells us we're looking at a deeply divided user experience. Let's start with the good stuff first, though.
The happy drivers consistently rave about the physical hardware. One 5-star reviewer completely hit the nail on the head, calling it tiny camera, big protection. They love that it delivers flawlessly on being out of sight and out of mind. People say the installation is an absolute breeze, and once it's stuck to your windshield, it's so unobtrusive you practically forget it's even there.
Fans also point out that the core recording functions and the voice commands work beautifully. That is, if you just let the camera do its basic job. Tons of users report that the 1080p footage is plenty crisp for everyday driving, and they absolutely love that it just powers up with the ignition and quietly does its thing in the background. Set it and forget it. Which brings us to Section 4, the connectivity roadblocks. Let's flip the script for a second and dig into what is driving that 11% of 1-star reviews. What's going so wrong for these folks? Well, this is where things get a bit concerning. A huge recurring complaint in the negative reviews is that the camera sometimes just stops recording. As one frustrated reviewer bluntly put it, intermittent recording is simply not acceptable for a dash cam. And they're right. The entire point of this gadget is to be an unblinking witness. If it randomly misses the one crucial moment you get into a fender bender, it completely defeats the purpose of having it in the first place.
And it doesn't stop there.
The software experience seems to be a total nightmare for a lot of people. Users are reporting massive headaches trying to use the wireless features and the Garmin Drive app. We're talking constant connection drops, a clunky interface, and agonizingly slow download speeds. One user even claimed it takes an hour just to download a 1-minute video wirelessly. At that point, you could drive home, plug the SD card into your laptop, and get your footage faster. It's a seriously frustrating bottleneck. So, Section 5. Dash Cam Alternatives. If all those Wi-Fi headaches are making you a little hesitant, let's zoom out and compare the Mini 3 to some of its direct competitors right there on Amazon.
Looking at the market, it's a fiercely competitive landscape. The Garmin sits at about $126 with a 4.2-star rating. But check out the Rove R2 4K and the Vantru E1 Pro. Both of these alternatives are actually cheaper, hovering right around $110, yet they pull in higher average customer satisfaction ratings of 4.5 and 4.3 stars. The Rove even gives you 4K resolution compared to Garmin's 1080p. It's kind of ironic. In this exact price bracket, there are incredibly strong options that might actually outperform the premium Garmin Grand, assuming ultimate stealth isn't your only priority.
Finally, Section 6, the final verdict. We've looked at the impressive hardware, the glowing praise, the app nightmares, and the stiff competition. Let's bring it all together.
Ultimately, the Garmin Mini 3 is kind of like a tale of two products. On one side, you have this incredibly compact, beautifully built piece of hardware that hides flawlessly in your car. But on the flip side, that amazing hardware is frequently dragged down by what users describe as a totally clunky, unreliable software and Wi-Fi experience. Basically, if you're expecting a seamless, futuristic app where your videos magically sync to your phone in 3 seconds flat, the data says you're probably going to be disappointed.
So here's the real question you've got to ask yourself before you hit that Add to Cart button. Is having an utterly hidden, stealthy camera worth dealing with potential Wi-Fi headaches? Are you cool with just popping the SD card out and putting it into a computer when you really need the footage? Or would you rather have a slightly bulkier camera from a competitor that gives you higher resolution and a smoother app experience? The choice is entirely up to you, but now you've got the real-world data to make a smart one. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and keep asking the right questions.